The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we're gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want, we got to organize.
Welcome to the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All Africans People's Revolutionary Party. I'm Comrade Jesse, here with my comrade Sadiq, and we are here to talk about a very important topic today. But before we get into that topic, we want to talk about what Pan-Africanism is. We're going to get into debunking some of those myths, but we define Pan-Africanism as the total unification of Africa under scientific socialism. And I'm going to give it up to Sadiq to get into the ancestors who we're going to honor, and then we'll get into the podcast.
Yeah, so all of you guys are familiar with the Pantsula Podcast. You know, we like to commemorate each episode to two of our ancestors. So in this episode, the first one would be Mehdi Ben Barka, who was a Moroccan revolutionary. A lot of people don't know about him. He was actually the one of the leading forces of the National Union of Popular Forces. He was also secretary of the Tricontinental Conference. That Tricontinental Conference was actually started in Havana, Cuba, for the purpose of fighting imperialism, capitalism, and defending human rights. So apparently in his struggle against the French for liberation, he was actually abducted by the West. There's involvement from the West, the French, and possibly even the US. So yeah, he's no longer with us, but we definitely like to commemorate this to him. And then we also like to commemorate this to Ella Collins. So for those who are familiar with Malcolm X, aka El Haj Malik El Shabazz, may Allah be pleased with him. That's his sister. And those who've read the autobiography of Malcolm X know how instrumental she was in his political growth and involvement. She was actually one of the people who helped him on a trip to Africa and things of that nature. So yeah, Ella Collins, she was actually a member of a member of the NOI. She was also a congresswoman and the secretary of Adam Clayton Powell when he was, I believe when he was a mayor or governor of New York, if I'm not mistaken. So we definitely like to commemorate them. And then just as Jesse was saying, this episode is centered around a lot of distortions and myths behind Pan-Africanism. I know people have different crazy ideas about what Pan-Africanism is, and we like to set a lot of those straight. So I guess kind of to kick this off, maybe we could just talk about some of the myths we've heard that's prevalent in society, some of the caricatures that we see out there that create these distortions and setting that straight. So yeah, I guess I just kind of leave it up for discussion on that.
Well, I mean, while you were talking, I'm just realizing every time we start the podcast, we say we define Pan-Africanism as the total like we give you all what we know Pan-Africanism is, because if you're not talking about Africa in a united front, Africa being united under scientific socialism, then you're just going ahead with capitalist propaganda, because if it's not socialism, it's capitalism. And we know that we can't interlink with capitalism, because that's shown itself to be the enemy to African people, to the world overall. And socialism is the answer. And we have blessed ancestors like Kwame Nkrumah, who's written many books talking about Africa. So many ancestors have taken the time to just put in the work of why Africa needs to be socialist, because Africa right now is ran by neo-colonial rule. Africa is oppressed, and that oppression is going to continually exist if people don't understand that Africa has to be united, because it's divided right now, and that unification is necessary for that liberation. So if we're not talking about Africa in any context of it being unified, I don't care what people say about Africa being divided because Africans don't trust each other because of the tribe or because of the phenotype. There's so many excuses made to reiterate the point that Africa can't be united, but we know that Africa must be united, because that's the only way that change can be made. So that's some of the things I'll start off with.
Yeah. And I think people have to remember that when you speak about Pan-Africanism, Pan and Pan-Africanism means all. So this doesn't mean you seclude, exclude any Africans. There's no historical relevance to Pan-Africanism, whether you talk about the conferences, before the conferences that you can link to, where there's revolutionary leaders of movements where people are just like, well, we're going to exclude this group of Africans. You're going to exclude, like, historically, it's always been about all Africans throughout the diaspora and on the continent, seeking full autonomy from the colonial imperialist powers. So that's one. And then just kind of reiterate some of the points and give the foundation of Pan-Africanism. As a lot of you guys know, some of you guys do, who like read up on the history of Pan-Africanism, that it didn't just start with the conferences. There's a African radical tradition that started prior to the first Pan-African Congress in 1900. You had the Haitian Revolution. You had resistance from Africans prior to the conferences. Africans resisted since the slave ships. I know a lot of people don't want to believe that because of distortions in history. You had Nat Turner. You had the revolution that was going on in Brazil, and I think it's called Palmares, Brazil. I may be butchering the name. I'm bad with pronouncing stuff, but you had it all over, right? You had resistance on the continent. You had Queen Nzinga. You had other, figures who were resisting and putting the ideas out there and creating a foundation for Pan-Africanism. So that really started with the first Pan-African Congress in 1900 started with Henry Sylvester Williams. And I believe the next one didn't happen until years later when DuBois picked it back up and had a sequence of various Pan-African Congresses, which entailed various African leaders and people. Essentially, before the fifth Pan-African Congress, I believe it was stated that, or the notion was put out there that it really wasn't like, had to do with the masses. It was just selected few people. It wasn't until the fifth Pan-African Congress it involved trade unions and organizations. So it kind of was more so on a mass level when that came about. You have figureheads like Nkrumah, I believe Garvey's wife and stuff like that. That was a part of that fifth Pan-African Congress as well. And that's where we got our definition of Pan-Africanism, which is where they defined it. And actually up until this point, there were studies. If you read Pan-Africanism or Communism by George Padmore, he talks about how leading up to the fifth Pan-African Congress, there's actually a lot of study on what social system should be in place, just in general, just a study of African history and things of that nature, and the current climate and conditions of Africans at the time, and what would be the best solution for it. So there's a history of study, and it wasn't just people just getting together and just thinking things out the sky, like, I think this is a good idea. Like, there's actual study and full analysis on the conditions of Africans and how to alleviate this from us. So, it wasn't until the one in 1945, the fifth Pan-African Congress, that was headed by DuBois, Nkrumah, and others, that was a part of it, and trade unions. Let me not leave that out there, and organizations that were part of it. And you had representatives from all parts of the African continent and the diaspora representing the organization as well. So that's which is once again, as Jesse iterated, the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. So yes, they did study what social but political economic system will work the best, and came out to be socialism because it's an egalitarian system. I know a lot of people don't like to believe that socialism is white man stuff. Right, socialism. It's really, for those who think that, man, just it's
if
really,
you say that, then what do you think of communalism? Because communalism was in Africa before, all of this other oppressive forces we have. So like, you got to look at the historical aspect of communalism. That's always been a part of African society, which is closer to, socialism. Like, we've always worked together, and that unified aspect is just very African. And for folks to act like it's not African and that we've never had no idea what it was, and it shows the work of the enemy is obviously at full throttle, because that's just repeating, and it's been repeating even back in, I'm thinking of negritude and the concept of that and how that influenced folks back in the day, of them not even perceiving themselves to really focus on the goal of socialism, because they were, too heavy on just how they looked, as opposed to just, understanding the historical understanding of where they come from.
Yeah. And I think that, like, you hit it right on the head, man. Like, socialism was rooted in communalism, right? Like socialism actually is just a more modern version of communalism, because communalism doesn't account for the industrialization period that took place, like, during the enslavement of Africans and the genocide against, the indigenous people of the West. So yeah, so like that's really what socialism is. It accounts for industrialization and the technology age that we're in, and us seizing the means of production, essentially
seizing the means of production. I mean, let's remember, there's socialism and there's capitalism. And capitalism, we already see what that's doing. I mean, capitalism has a history of just constant exploitation. Africa is not going to ever be on good terms with capitalism until capitalism is driven out of Africa. And oppression in all forms, from neocolonialism, all of those things are interlinked. And for whatever reason, these myths continue. I mean, we know the reason, because the more people became aware of the unification of Africa, it was like I was talking about with Winford on our last podcast. When we come to that understanding of the importance of it, it's going to encourage us to make that change and to organize all of us, no matter where we are, the lumpen proletariat, all of us from all walks of life can join in this fight and fight this beast. We can't just think, oh, well, it's only some of us. And it's amazing how even you talking about the conferences and the congresses that were the congresses of Pan-Africanism, how, they at first had it with just select people, and then they realized, no, we need everybody on deck. Like everybody has to come together to fight this beast. And we can't do it if we are not unified. And if you're not calling for unity, then you're calling for division. You're calling for what capitalism uses as their main tool, which is to divide us. I mean, we came to this continent divided. We came here divided. I mean, that's the whole thing. They ripped us away from our families, split us apart, and had us divided and living in this, separation. And if we continually separate and not understand the importance of unity, that's just going to continue the degradation.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually want to tackle and discuss further some of the things you mentioned, like, and even something I brought up in relation to like socialism. Like you have people now who, and this is not a new phenomenon. This is probably like, you could probably go back maybe a few decades, people saying socialism doesn't work in Africa. Socialism is a failed system and whatever, right? Or Pan-Africanism is a failed system. I guess you can lump all that into one thing, right? Like in one pool, not really accounting for the role imperialists has played into making sure socialism or Pan-Africanism doesn't thrive on the continent. Essentially, like you look at the coup that happened with Nkrumah, you look what happened at the death of Kwame Ture, the coup happened during his funeral, for them to overthrow the PDG. You had so many different, you could go on and on to each African state that was heading towards a socialist state, to the imperialist powers ensuring that Africa doesn't unify or install any form of socialism or egalitarianism within the systems. I can't speak right now. I'm sorry. I just put this shit out there.
I hear what you're saying. No, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, it's late. I don't know, but anyway, so you can't really tie. It's interrelated into that. I guess the failure of Pan-Africanism or socialism.
Right, like anytime socialism is attempted, the government comes in. It's like, all right, let's get them. Let's just destroy their moves to their right to self-determination. They use sanctions. They use embargoes. They use all of what they could to make the people seem as if they're not able to do it without them, intervening. And that just shows you the power of socialism, because they understand the power. If they left Africa alone and, Kwame Nkrumah and the PDG were able to do what they did, and what they continue to do, like it would have proven the system of capitalism, it would have threatened them. So any threat to capitalism, they come harder with, whatever they can to just divide and conquer.
Yeah, you look at what Gaddafi was doing in Libya, and stuff like that too, and what Obama and others have done to destabilize Libya after the fact, to kill him and things of that nature. So, you had assassinations, like, you had, like you said, embargoes, blockades, just outright overthrow of governments and stuff like that. So you can't just say that it failed on its own goodwill with without the interference of that. Because obviously, I think if we didn't, and I know if we didn't have that interference, we would definitely be further along in Pan-African unity. Africa will possibly even be united and socialist by now, to some extent. So, but the West knows how dangerous that could be. The same way they've done it through any socialist project. You talk about the Soviet Union, you talk about Cuba now, you talk about China now. You know what I mean? Like, in various ways, they constantly.
They're going to come up with machinery to make those countries seem like they're doing wrong against the people, that the people are struggling, and they need the assistance from the American troops to come in and help them. I mean, that's the playbook that they've never stopped playing, because, and a lot of people fall for it. You know, a lot of people's interest and concern, or even knowledge about other countries, is from capitalist media. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, yeah, I don't know, they're struggling out there. Like when what was going on in Afghanistan, I remember seeing a lot of propaganda that was out saying, oh, we need to help the Afghan women. Like, they're under a lot of oppression, y'all. We gotta help them. It's like, y'all really accepting that that's what the government wants to do? Like, it's for their own interest. They're going to do it to just overtake them. That's what they always, you can't trust nothing. The capitalism lies all the time. Not some of the time, all the time. And if we have no awareness of that, we're going to keep falling for whatever trick they play in light of progress or in light of any type of justice.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like it's always going to be a struggle. I mean, the struggle is continuous. I mean, so to just isolate Pan-Africanism and then people also have to understand that Pan-Africanism isn't an ideology. That's another thing I think we have to talk about too. Mm-hmm. Pan-Africanism is a failed ideology. One, you can't fail at it because it's not an ideology. And two, how do you fail at an ideology? Even if it is ideology, it isn't. Ideology is a set of ideas that you follow to get you to achieve your objective. So Pan-Africanism is an objective. Now you have various ideologies that lead you to that objective. You know, you could be a Garveyist, you could be a Nkrumah Tureist, you could be a Cabralist, so forth and so on. You know, so it's like people have to come to that understanding as well, that Pan-Africanism is an objective that hasn't been realized yet that we're trying to achieve. We
got to fight for that. We got to organize for that. I mean, Pan-Africanism, because it's forces against it. It's never been able to really thrive in its own, because those forces recognize that power would threaten their hegemony. But we have to understand, we have to educate ourselves politically and become aware of the necessity of it, because so many of us are being misled by the propaganda machine, constantly telling us that it's not our concern about what's happening in Africa or what's happening. And if you're not concerned about Africa, that just shows you that system is doing what it wants you to do, because most people have no clue about those things. And it's not necessarily due to their own ignorance, but understanding that we're in colonized lands. So they're giving us all of the information to influence us to go towards the system, not anything against the system. When we look at history, we see how that's been unraveled.
Yeah, exactly. And then also some people like to say, oh yeah, people who are like quoted socialists are Eurocentric, and you know what I mean? It's like being a Pan-Africanist, like even in our party, we always talk about anything we do, any analysis we make, we center Africa on that analysis. You could talk to anyone who's been in this party for a prolonged period of time, even a year. I've only been in this party a year, and I know that, like, we talk about that every time. Any geopolitical piece we're talking about within our work study circles, any books we're reading, even if it's a book that's not, we read Lenin, we read other revolutionaries outside of Africa, but even when speaking that, we talk about how we could apply it to the struggle for African liberation and African unity. So, that's another thing too that people have to get this idea that socialists, like kind of like we were saying earlier, socialism is another thing. That's also something that we're trying to achieve. Socialism isn't an ideology. People get confused between objectives and ideologies.
Right. They don't read the dictionary. Make their own version of what it means, and then it's like they're going and speaking off of that. And it's like, no, there are actual definitions and objectives to these ideologies. They are not just words. They're not just, ketchup to the fries. Like, they have substance. And that's what we're fighting for. I mean, it's an objective. I mean, we here at the All Africans People Revolutionary Party understand it as an objective, because right now we see, we don't have it. When we don't have that unity, we have division. We see what's going on in Ethiopia right now. We see what's going on all over the continent. And these struggles are intensifying.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you don't think it's something to concern yourself with when it's actually becoming more and more like they're not giving up on this. They understand the resources that are coming from Africa. They understand the exploitation that's just happening at a rapid pace. I mean, I was just reading from, I believe it was an interview that Evan did with for Burkina Books. And in Burkina Faso right now, there was like an internet blockade. Like, they had no internet. They were taking away, people's access to protest and all of that, and just like that's happening all the time.
Yeah, I mean, they're resistant right now. Burkina Faso, you know, we're in solidarity. You know what I mean? It's African, so we're in solidarity with you. And all Africans fighting for liberation and against oppression. You know, our party, I could say this boldly. Our party stands with the people of Burkina Faso. So yeah, it's very intense there right now. But you know, Africans will prevail. The masses.
Africans, we're going to prevail. I mean, we understand that we're going to win. And we know why we're going to win, because we have the objective. And that's why it's important to just focus on that and to not be so misled by anything speaking other than that. You know, because the myths that really exist against this objective kind of come in various forms. You know, people don't really understand the historical aspect, but it's also recognizing with what you mentioned with the conception of the Pan-African conferences and how there've been meetings, they've been like, this just didn't fall out the sky. You know, we've had a history to move this forward.
Exactly, yeah. And then also even a notion of like, like some people on the continent don't identify as African. You know, we should just unify certain segments of Africa and stuff like that. That's like, how do you call it? People be saying this like online, and they have like Garvey or Malcolm X as their or Nkrumah like their bio picture. And then there's no Pan-Africanists that was serious about the liberation of African people, that contributed things, qualitative and quantitative things to the struggle. You know what I mean? That essentially was like, oh yeah, we're going to segment these people.
We're going to segment
every Pan-Africanist that you could think of: Cabral, Nkrumah, Garvey, and their movements. I don't want to isolate it into just those figures. You know, they had organizations, PIGC, UNIA, the CPP. You know, these movements and these figureheads also, they also understood the whole continent in its entirety. Like when Nkrumah was organizing his various conferences on the continent and things of that nature and things like that, he also understood that the whole continent, and he actually made sure that North Africans, East Africans, West Africans, South Africans were also all
Africans. Africans for the Africans.
Exactly. Africa for the Africans, man. Martin Delaney quote right there, man. It's like, come on, bro. Like, I don't know what some of you guys are like thinking this is, that you could just isolate yourself from not only the global economy or other people struggling outside of the continent, but you can isolate yourself from people within the continent. Like, where has this worked? Where is this practical, and how will it work? And
how is it
fun? You know what I mean? Like, how you a pan once again means all.
Pan, right? It's like pandemic.
Everywhere.
It's like epidemic. It's not like this is not just only certain. Like, no, we need everybody, all hands on deck. I mean, yeah. That separation, again, people think that because it's like, yeah, we don't got no friends. We've said that many times. We've debunked that many times. Like, that's just not a historical statement to make. To assume that we haven't had a history of solidarity with other oppressed folks is just an illusion. I mean,
exactly. Like, yes, you know, people like to play. I think a lot of times, even when we talk about just within the continent, not even getting, we'll probably get to that in a few, like talking about other oppressed people outside of the continent and groups. Essentially, when people look at it, they look at African as solely just a phenotype. They play very like they do this whole eugenics thing where if you don't have, even if you're not dark skinned or you're not light skinned,
type of hair,
you don't have the certain type of hair, like not understanding that there's various phenotypes within the African continent alone. Like, you could go within West Africa and see various different phenotypes: small noses, big lips, thinner lips, whatever. Like, you can see all types of stuff. You go to North Africa and see the same thing, South Africa, whatever. So to just leave it as, oh yeah. And then also, even if you was to go off a phenotype, right, specifically, people who have the Bantu features or the typical Bantu type features, right? That you and I have on this call, like they even live in those areas where you think that is predominantly, or you say that's predominantly like non-African features.
Right.
So what about them? Do you not like, do you not care about those people? Do they not deserve liberation or anything? Like, you guys are very, like, it's very, it's a lot of ideological confusion, right? And I don't want to place blame on people solely on them, like, oh, you guys need to do better. I know these institutions in the West have created an anti-intellectual environment for us, right? Where I think I remember seeing an article saying that most adults have only an 8th grade reading level.
Yeah, I read. I saw that on your story.
Yeah, so I'm like,
the literacy is really low.
Yeah, like it's serious. Like a lot of adults have that. So, you know, the system itself breeds a lot of ideological confusion. It breeds a lot of people anti-intellectualism. It breeds, you know, people not to further investigate into things. They see things on a surface level, just like, oh, okay, this is it, whatever, right? So I think I understand that the system breeds that stuff, but you know, this is why we call for everyone to join an organization, get in the political education process when you join an organization. Most organizations have that process, like the AAPRP. We have that process. When you join us, you have to engage in the work study process. There's no way around it.
Right. And it's going to help you. I mean, honestly, the work study process is going to sharpen your analysis in a way that I'm so grateful to be a part of this organization because of that sharpening of that analysis. So like, it's a good thing to join an organization, y'all. You're going to get benefits. I mean, and these are things that, you know, you can share and use for the rest of your life to help you understand and cut between the nonsense, because there's so much nonsense. And as you said, it's not that people are just dumb for the sake of not understanding. They just don't have that awareness because the system is teaching you to basically just produce and to consume, or rather just more so to consume, like consume, produce for them, you know, don't have no own product, don't have no self-determination, but basically use your time spending it on all these things to not make you happy, to dislocate your memory about where you come from, to have no understanding that you belong to a people that have fought this system. Like we've never just stood by. Like just reading the book from not to go on a tangent, but thinking about the W.E.B. DuBois book right now, we're reading The World in Africa and how he listed just all of the revolts. I want to just read a couple of them because I was just like, look at all of these revolts that are not documented. From 1522 to 1600, 1663, land given Jamaican Maroons, 1691, revolt in Haiti, 1692, revolt in Barbados, 1702, revolt in Barbados, 1711, Negroes fight French in Brazil. Like it just goes on and on. He's just listing dates. Like ever since colonialism reared its head, we've never stood idly by. And so don't ever feel like you can't do nothing, or you know, that's why joining an organization is important, because it's going to give you that weaponry, that machinery, that knowledge that, I can do this. Like nothing can come against the organized masses. And that's going to just cut between the nonsense, because the nonsense that's telling you that you can't do it and that you're going to just have to produce for the system all the time and not really have that genuine love for the people, that can be destroyed when you come together and understand the importance of that unity, because it's been done. And it's constantly being done. And you just got to tap into that. And that's why and thankfully we have history. We have history to show us that it's been done before. So it's like, there's really nothing to fear. You know, it's just about understanding the importance of it.
Yeah. And, you know, kind of tying into what you're talking about with the revolts, like, people have to understand those things are interrelated. Like the radical tradition of Africans essentially is all interrelated. Like, you know, the Haitian Revolution, I think, gave a lot of hope and inspiration to Africans throughout, you know, the West, you know, who were displaced. Africans who were displaced through slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. You know, when you think about that, it's like, you know, the Haitian Revolution, then it sparked off like various revolts all over the world. They were burning everything down everywhere, right? The same way when you have the Fifth Pan-African Congress went on, and then you have on the continent, as soon as that happened, you know, Africans eradicating colonialism, right, fighting for independence, and stuff like that, right? And then, you know, Ghana came about, and Guinea, and then, you know, so forth and so on, right? You know, after that one Congress. And then after that, you see the correlation in between the Black Power movement in the US. Like all this stuff is happening like all at the same time. Like it's one little spark, and it starts sparking off in different places at different times. So once again, I guess it kind of tied this into another myth in relation to like, why should we care about Africans, or Africans don't care about us? It's like this whole struggle is interrelated. People are so caught up in you know, American exceptionalism here in the West.
They forgot where they came from. You know, remember, you come from Africa. Like this is not your land, man. Like you over here defending a land that doesn't belong to you. When you have that understanding, like my home is Africa. Exactly. My home is Africa. So I am affected by what goes on in Africa. Of course I'm affected by what goes on in Africa, because that's where I would have been if they didn't come and steal me from. I mean, they took us away from our home. That's the whole thing. Like, and when you stay, I mean, that's we staying on these colonized lands, and we adopt what they tell us to think about ourselves, and what they tell us to really how we're to perceive ourselves, how we're to perceive our neighbors. And, that's what's going to give that illusion, because you're taking their knowledge. They got their own form of propaganda that they're giving you. And then there's what is when you look in the history of who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of that all of that stems from the fact that Africa itself is weak. You don't want to identify as being African because Africa is weak. So you don't want to, and it all ties into us being colonial subjects and being colonized people. Whereas since we are so downtrodden and oppressed, we try to grasp at any type of coping mechanism to make us feel better. Well, I can't be African, I have to be something else, just so you can feel good about yourself, because
I'm not poor.
There's no optimism in this current, and there's a good reason why you shouldn't be optimistic, because of the everyday struggles and oppression that we deal with, and barely surviving under capitalism and under imperialism. But at the same time, we have to be scientific in our understanding. Given the measure and understanding of what's going on in Africa, we have to understand, okay, so now let's make our efforts to here locally and also to help out Africa to unify. And the reason why that's important for Africa to unify and to be socialist is because once Africa is unified socialist, that gives Africa power. So Africa can be destabilized for Western benefits, right? And profits. So in that case, if something is happening to Africans here, Africa can intervene into the situation. Africa can help on the behalf of Africans, no matter where they are. At the end of the day, because it's all political. Everything we're doing is all about politics, right? At the end of the day. So it's like the same way. I believe not too long ago, there was actually someone, I believe a Chinese diplomat, I believe, or I think she was a diplomat, or like at least maybe a bureaucrat. I could be wrong. Someone can fact check me in the comments. I don't know too much of details, but pretty much the premise was she was incarcerated. I believe she was in Canada. U.S. was trying to extradite her to the U.S. When she was, but China intervened. China is powerful. China is united. China is not. China is dealing with a lot of propaganda against it, but they were able to intervene and get her back to China. So imagine if Africa had the same exact thing, and that could happen for us if as long as we struggle and make efforts to do it. It may not happen in our lifetime, but we can lay the groundwork.
Definitely can lay the groundwork
for that, essentially. So that's why it's important for Africa, because to be united, and because imagine if Africa is united and there's a situation where Africans are being oppressed like how they are now here in the West. If in an event where something is happening, Africa can intervene and say, okay, so we're going to impose a sanction or not give you guys access to cobalt, or give you access to
buy those iPhones and the Androids.
Exactly. Yeah, those are the things that powers your electronics, right? They're gonna make sure they're gonna hurt them. Like, all right, they gotta make sure this is right. They gotta, because we need access to these multinational corporations.
And that's the thing. Like, Africa is fueling the world right now.
Yeah,
the cars we drive. The chocolate we eat, all of the things that we take advantage of that we don't even connect to Africa is what Africa is supplying. Yeah. And not having that understanding is really just detrimental, because Africa is doing all of that. And as you said, if Africa was unified, imagine what Africa would be able to do on the behalf of all Africans. Mm-hmm. All the people that's right now saying, I'm not African, will go be running, being like, oh, I'm African. Oh, yeah, I'm African. As soon as we organize together, yeah, you're going to want to be African. And I have never met anyone not proud to be an African unless they didn't know who or what Africa is. If you don't know, if you haven't studied your history, then yeah, you're not going to be proud, because what they're telling you is awful. They tell us, as you mentioned, all the time Africa is painted as very, very poor, fleas, people got big stomachs, and then the opposite is also carried, that they don't like, either Africans are very poor or either they're too bougie when it comes to America, that they don't like, regular Africans and like Black Americans, quote unquote.
Exactly.
I'm not using the term Black Americans, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, Africans here in America, yeah.
Yeah, like, they think they better than us. It's like, what?
And that's the thing too. Like, people have to make that correlation. Once again, dialectics. It talks about the one component of it, a tenet of dialectics is dialectical materialism, is the interrelation of things. So when you look at that, I don't know how people don't correlate that with how Africans here are pathologized. Looked at it and demonized, right? In the sense that, oh yeah, African men are criminal and women are loud and rambunctious and crazy. You don't want to be around them. Like, it goes both ways, right? Like, it's the same thing. Like, they create these myths and propaganda and stuff like that around us just so we don't, for the sole purpose of unifying. They don't understand. Like,
hello,
literally, like, people think I'm just saying this either. Like, you could make the historical analysis. You could talk about Garvey when during his movement, he couldn't go to the continent. The people, Africa was under colonialism, like direct rule from the Western European powers. So they had political power in the continent. So they ensured that he wasn't allowed to come to the continent. Actually, in certain places on the continent, if you were caught with any of his newspapers, I believe it was called the Negro World, you were, in some places you were subject to go to prison to do time in jail. I mean, for that, because they didn't want to foster the idea of Africans uniting, because Africa uniting is power. They want to be able to maintain and control the resources as it is now, as they are now. They want to make sure, like, these aren't, like, once again, this analysis I'm talking to you about has a material aspect to it. Like, you can literally,
it's not just in our heads. Like,
this is not in our heads. We didn't make this up. We didn't
we
didn't wake up. You could go through the comments. I mean, through the description of this and look through the sources that we have in here, all the books that we have here too as well. To tie in, I could, if anyone wants to reach out to me personally, I can send you articles on these things, whatever. Like, there's a material basis for what we're saying. These aren't done by, and there's multiple sources that can back this up. Now, I'm not saying one or two. I'm saying dozens of books and stuff like that. I mean, so books, articles, whatever you think you need, we have it. But yeah, essentially that is the goal. They don't want us to unify. So those of you who get on here and say all this crazy stuff, you literally are advancing white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist notions about your own people. You're internalizing self-hatred. It's sick. It's bad. You need help. You need to join an organization.
We can provide that help.
That's the medicine. That's the medicine.
That's the medicine. Right.
You have a cough. You go and you get your NyQuil, and the AAPRP and other organizations are your NyQuil. I mean, if you have that cough, if you're
better than NyQuil, we're gonna give you all of the tools that you need. We got processes like criticism and self-criticism, just in case you think you know it all. We gonna remind you. Oh, wait. Because we all need it, right? And so that's what organizing is equipped to do, to help you know that we must have a genuine love for humanity, because humanity, for the most part, all of humanity is oppressed, and that understanding of oppression, we got to do something about that oppression, because the system has done something to continue that oppression. They've continued the ways of separation back to colonialism. I mean, now we got neo-colonialism. So right now, they might not be in Africa, but they got puppets that look like you, that don't have your interests. And that's why it's important to also have a class analysis. You got to understand nation, gender, class analysis. These things are connected, and you can do something about it, and you can actually not feel degraded, because the system is, again, telling you can't do something about it. So much dehumanization. That's one of the main blood vessels of capitalism, just making you feel like you can't do it, or you got to do it just one way. But when you connect to the source, and when you return to the source, like Amilcar Cabral said, right, you got it, right? Like you want to have that motivation, but you got to come to that reality of unification, because unification can't be done in individual vacuums. That's the whole contradiction. Like, you can't be in your own vacuum thinking that you're the only one struggling. You ain't the only one struggling. We can show you, we can connect that. There's a whole host of others struggling. And there have been works and efforts done to combat this system. And we just got to tap into that awareness. And debunking these myths are important, because I feel like so many people just don't have the motivation. They don't think it's possible. They don't think it's been done before, because, either they haven't picked up those books, or the books they've picked up are obviously bourgeois interpretations, which just leave us very numb and very, master, whatever you say, as long as I get out the way. But when we look at the history, it's like, no, we are survivors, and we are going to continue. We're going to win this fight, because we understand that that's the only way it's going. Nothing's going to change, or nothing's going to stay the same. Everything changes, and the more we organize, it's just going to overthrow the system. So don't ever feel like you can't do it because it's never been done before. Nothing just stays the same. Everything is constantly changing. And that just gives me motivation to not feel at any point like, oh, I don't know, like we are oppressed. Nothing can stand against the organized masses. It's been said before, but it will be said again. nothing can stand against the organized masses.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing can stand against it, man. We outnumber them. They're literally the elites.
Right.
Account for less than 1%. Less than 1%. I mean, so it's like, I'm talking about the elites. I'm not talking about Jay-Z. I'm not talking about the petty bourgeois. I'm talking about the ruling class. Right. They're the ones who own the control. The petty bourgeois has to go to the elites to do their ventures. That's why they do ventures with LV, MH, Louis Vuitton, what Hennessy, and they do ventures with Bank of America, whatever, right? Because they're the ones who owns the means of productions. They own the factories, they own the fields, they own all these things, right? To produce these things. So yeah, they're literally less than 1%. We outnumber them. So unified, you know what I mean? Like, I'm happy to see too that recently there's been a lot of like people unionizing against these corporations and stuff like that. Yeah. So we need to keep that energy going, and we need that energy.
More walkouts, more strikes. And again, you're not going to see that on CNN. That's why we tell you.
Of course.
CNN, even certain Twitter channels are not going to show you that information. Because they know how to block out this information in countries where it's really happening. So they could definitely, and that just shows you, like, we got to come with more beneficial and clever ways of advancing how we, walk these streets. Because they out here finding out ways to just get us involved in whatever ploy they got. Currently, it's NFTs and Bitcoin. That's been going on for a while. But I am saying it, actually. I am saying it. I'm not, you got an NFT, all right. That ain't helping you. That ain't helping us. It ain't helping most folks, But like, they'll do whatever they can to make people feel like they can actually advance themselves without remembering that if most of us are struggling and we outnumber the people who are, causing this struggle, why shouldn't we just unify to that understanding and just fight the system when we have that understanding? Because that's what's the reality. This is based off of truth. We're not just saying this. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of the fronting and all of the, I'm all right. Nah, most people are not all right. Exactly. I mean, and if you can really connect to the reasons why, it's not an illusion. It's not, so much has been written to make it seem as if it's your fault. You gotta blame yourself. You gotta look at your own actions as to why you've not further advanced in society. But if you're not blaming the system, and a lot of people don't like hearing that. I've noticed a lot of people like, you can't blame capitalism for everything. You can't blame capitalism for everything. Yes, you can. Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? Because like capitalism is exploitative. To not blame capitalism, to not act as if capitalism doesn't have, it's pumping 24/7. It ain't stopping. It never stops. And you don't think that has a reason why that influences one's psyche, that causes depression, that causes, one to feel like they can't do anything because all of what they are motivated to do is basically shot down and not even shown as an alternative. Mm-hmm. Like, of course it's going to be the reason.
Yeah. Once again, people don't tie in the system to our everyday oppression. They think it's your fault. How is it? I don't control or run the government. The people don't have, it'll be different. You can make criticism, a criticism like that when the people seize power, or if the people had power in this country. But these are elected officials, bureaucrats, and bureaucrats don't really even run. They're puppets because they do whatever corporations say, multinational corporations say, who are funding their campaigns and funding them in general. So they're just pulling the strings at the end of the day and pushing their agenda forward. And this has a material basis too, because you could look up any organization and look at the political action committee and where that money goes to.
Right.
One of the other racist, vile, bipartisanship, one of the parties, right? Like the Democrats or the Republicans, right? For your Joe Bidens and your Trumps and whatever, right? That's where the money goes to. That's what these people are appeasing to. They're appeasing to Zionists, imperialists, capitalists. That's who your presidents and your other bureaucrats, elected officials are appeasing, are trying to appeal to. So, or subservient to. So it's like, I don't know why people. But anyway, that's just backwards thinking. Once again, you have to engage and study, and you have to. There's no way around it.
No, and that's a good thing. I don't know. A lot of folks think that's bad, and unfortunately, so much has been played against education. Education is seen as, oh, that's bourgeois. That's, you think you're better than me because you have an education, education belongs to everybody. And it's not hard to understand that when you really find out the importance of reading and seeing how it's been done, like education programs, if people understood. And, and even taking the time, like, I just also want to take the time to thank everyone who's listening and who has been watching these podcasts and other podcasts that are going on to just further understand what's going on in the system. Like, we do appreciate your time watching, because, a lot of times it's hard for people to read. And we're definitely still trying to work on ways we can get this information so that it can be more accessible, but just know that it's possible. Like, it is not a hard, and even, I don't use the word hard, but we say struggle, because struggle, everything in life is basically in struggle. So don't fear that. Don't think that, I don't want to be called out, or I don't want to be told that. Like, it's okay. And it should be welcome, because again, anything that can be able to advance you and further your analysis is a good thing. I don't think it should be swayed against at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Facts. Yeah, I think also another thing, which kind of goes to, one of the things we kind of talked about before, but just the whole notion of like, I'm cool with unifying Africans, but I can't do it with those queer people. They're sick in the head. And I can't do it with those religious folks because, they're the white man's religion. And
right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I kind of want to tackle that too, because once again, to go back to the meaning of Pan everyone means
everybody. Everybody.
Pan means all.
That means all.
If you're a Pan-African, if you call yourself Pan-Africanist, you need to change whatever you call yourself, because that's not you being a Pan-Africanist. That's you being something else. You need to create your own term and your own stance, because once again, there's not historical relevance where the Pan-Africanists have said you have to denounce your religion, you have to denounce your sexual orientation. Right. So once again, you can't, there's no evidence of this. And if there is evidence of it, that we have to investigate and see who wrote that.
Right.
We have to investigate and see what ties they have to them. What's their relationship to the imperialist powers and the capitalist powers? Like what's their ties to it? Because there's no historical relevance to that. Because Pan-Africanists knew and understood that we have to unify us regardless. Like, what do we get out of oppressing people based off their faith and based off of their sexual orientation? If we're talking about we're seeking liberation for all people, how do you say, but no, those people who are queer, I don't know about them, because we have to talk to them and indoctrinate them and enforce an identity on them that they don't associate with, or those religious folks. And understanding that majority of people, I don't know what people, and that's the thing too, I think people say these things because they're not organizing. They're not in organizations. Because if you try to organize these things, you will see how ineffective you will be in organizing people under those banners. You wouldn't organize anybody. you wouldn't organize anybody. I'm sorry. Like, you know what I mean? Like, who's going to adopt these false premises, these false.
It's doing the work of the enemy. You separating the moment again, if you calling yourself a Pan-Africanist and yet you separating someone because of their identity, separating someone because of their faith, how can you're directly contradicting the term that is meant to establish that unification?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Like we all in this together.
That the ideology itself, like we're talking about revolutionary Pan-Africanism. We're not talking about pseudo Pan-Africanism. Right. Revolutionary means the ultimate change in society. You want to see things change. Being anti-LGBTQ has roots in conservatism. So I don't know where you guys think that being conservative is revolutionary Pan-Africanism. That doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. I don't know where this comes from. Like what's revolutionary about being being against queer people? Or what's revolutionary?
Right. What's revolutionary about that? Exactly.
What's revolutionary about that?
Like, I don't revolutionary. That's problematic.
It's anti-revolutionary. Like I don't get that. Like or trying to impose because you are not religious or you look at religion as some like, and that's even another topic. I don't know if I think we do have an episode.
We do. I don't want to watch that again because I think we did mention just some of the tenets of that, but that can definitely be talked about again.
Yeah, like if you're talking about solely just because people just like to say Abrahamic faith, right? They like to target that. You look at all Abrahamic faith; they have their roots in African spirituality, in Africa too as well. Right. So I don't know where like you guys like are coming with like, we have to impose these things on people for it to be truly like I know we're gonna have a cultural revolution on the continent, but that's to dispose of all the ills within our social traditions and culture, right? Like we're not talking about imposing a religion, idea of like, oh yeah, you need to have this faith, or you shouldn't believe in religion or whatever, or you shouldn't be queer or whatever, right? The cultural revolution has to do with many different aspects, like the music and certain things that, like things like polygamy, right? It's going to deal with things like that. It's going to deal with what's the word? Patriarchy. It's going to deal with things of that nature. It's not going to deal with people.
Right. We deal with, that's the whole aspect of revolution.
I don't know where, if anything, we're going to work in harmony with people's identities and their faith and stuff like that. That's what it should be about.
Right. Harmony
with the people and harmony with the people and progressing people. Culture is about pushing the people forward. So anything that is against pushing the people forward or pushes us backwards needs to be eradicated within that culture. And that's what cultural revolution is truly about. It's progressing the people to push forward and, to live more harmonious. So I don't know where, once again, I don't know. Once again, if someone has a mountain of evidence where Garvey, Nkrumah, Cabral, Ben Barka, Nasser, Ben Bella, Julius Nyerere, Mugabe, Kenneth Kaunda, Malcolm X, any of these people I named, or even other ones who were Pan-Africanists, starch Pan-Africanists, give me a amount of evidence that shows all these people or a good amount of these people have accounted for you not being religious or you being anti-queer. And, maybe I'll reevaluate my stance, but I know what I'm saying because I could study. I'm in the process of the AAPRP of studying. I do study outside of this. So I know there's no roots of that anywhere in the African radical tradition or Pan-Africanist history. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. And you guys don't know what you're talking about neither. You're just spewing
they giving
conservative, neoconservative rhetoric with that stuff, man. I'm sorry. Like, where is this stuff coming from? It's crazy. It's sick, man. It's sick. I had to get that
because it's anti-revolution. It's anti-Pan-Africanism.
Exactly.
You're not speaking of unity. All of the things coming out of your mouth are just clarifying oppression through capitalist lens.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just all it is. Like you speak in any talk of Africa not being unified because it ain't happened or any type of distortion of what actually has happened. That's just the evidence of capitalism remaining the dominant force. And again, capitalism doesn't teach you to read. Doesn't teach you to analyze. A lot of people don't, read books, actually going into it, breaking it down. And it's good to read it with other people, with an organization. You're not just reading it alone. You're actually dissecting it with a group of folks.
And you're struggling on these topics. And we don't want to reduce this, like, the AAPRP is not a reading club too. Like, we do work. It's a work.
Absolutely.
So you study and you work. So I don't want to reduce, you guys just read books and don't do anything else. And It's like, we have a long history of doing work and we still do work to this day, ourselves within the org as well. So like, we just don't reduce everything we do to just, you have to, when you come in the org, you have to be a part of a committee. You have to be part of what's the other thing we call it? Task force.
Task force.
Right? You have to be part of multiple task forces and stuff like that to improve and boost the party. You have to make coalitions and things of that nature. So yeah, there's work that we do on the ground, on the boots to improve the party, to build the party, and work with other organizations too. There's work we do in our communities as well. So yeah, we don't want to make it just seem like, join the APRP, they just sit around and read books all day. Yes, but we struggle around other things too as well.
We struggle around things. We read, but we also sharpen our analysis through the work study process. I mean, that's the thing about work study. It's something no one can avoid. Everyone got to do it, and everyone has different assignments, and that just means, everyone has a chance to come up with questions, to take the minutes, to present whatever presentation is needed. So everyone is involved, and that's what we need. We need everybody, shuffling just to do because this whole thing of I can't do that. It's like, nah, you can. You can. The system telling you can't, but that's because the system don't want you to do anything but produce for the system. But if you're working for your people, you can do it all to the best of your abilities, and that's something we need to remind ourselves of. This whole aspect that it can't be done, that's just the biggest myth encapsulated in all the myths we've talked about, is just the inability of Africans to do it. But as been mentioned before, we have examples of constant organizations fighting this system, making sure that we're unified, and we have to just connect with that, and we outnumber them. back to that point, we outnumber them. We have nothing really should stand in your way. The things that you can say that, I mean, obviously no one wants to feel defeated. And again, the system constantly makes us feel like we can't do it because it's always telling us that. But we have examples, and, you know, those examples and historical teachings from all of our ancestors remain to this day. And we're continuing that work. And don't ever feel like you can't, because it's been done and it's already been said through the ancestors who've already done the work.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is, man. And, you know, I guess one point I do want to circle back to, just one more, like even the notion of like, oh yeah, the relationship is one-sided in relation to Pan-Africanism. It only benefits people on the continent. That has a material basis for diasporic Africans. When you think about one example I like to think about is Nkrumah, right? When they defeated, at least at that time period, that short stint period, you know, when they gained independence, I should say, I don't want to say defeated, but I should say when they gained independence, they actually gave a lot of aid and invited a lot of Africans, primarily a lot of Africans from the States, you know, refuge and help and aid and things of that nature. Like you had DuBois who went back there. You have various other, there's a book, actually I put it in if I remember, I'm not home right now. Hopefully I could find it before I repost this. There's a book, White Malice, that's what it's called. Okay. And it outlines, and you can also read like, you know, a biography of Kwame Nkrumah by Jules Monet, which is his editorial assistant, who accounts for all the African Americans and people who were African outside of the continent who came back and, you know, was welcomed into Ghana and to make contributions to live in Ghana as well. So there's various other elements of that happening. We had the Black Panther parties when they were under the siege of COINTELPRO, under attack. You know, they sought refuge in Algeria as well and got aid over there. So there's a material basis for these things. You know, you had the Haitian Revolution. You know, they made sure slavery wasn't allowed within their constitution. Like the likes of Dessalines and Louverture, who you know, who gained liberation during Haitian independence and invited Africans throughout the diaspora to come back, you know, to seek refuge and things of that nature. So once again, these things are, you know, there's a mountain of evidence to show that yes, this is a mutual benefit for all Africans, of Africa being united. Once again, like I don't know where
what could be sweeter or what could be better than Africa being united. I don't see what could be better.
There's nothing could be better than that. So
that's beyond, by the way, Africa United. I just got to say it is beyond Wakanda. It's beyond that dumb fictional what Africa United, beyond what can be shown on the screen because of the supply of what Africa is doing for the world, what Africa, just the richness of Africa and the harmony. Just thinking of everything. Just think about all the things that come from the drums, like music, like all of this stuff. Imagine all of that just in harmony.
Yeah.
That can be worked for and done.
All the way. Yeah, man. We have to get rid of these unscientific analysis and get to a better understanding. And especially some of the ones who proclaim to do the reading or do the work, whatever they claim that to be, outside of not joining, with them not being in the organization saying they're doing work, whatever. But we have to get ready because there's just so many myths that permeate, and it's dangerous myths too. Because people like even myself, I don't want to make this a bashing thing about this brother or anything, but like people who I speak to and talk about Pan-Africanism, the only person they know nowadays is Dr. Umar, and they like, oh yeah, you're on that Dr. Umar stuff. No, that's not. I'm gonna just leave it at that. No, I'm not gonna bash him or anything. I'm not gonna. This is not a bash session. I think I bashed him before, so
that's what I just did.
That's not the brand of Pan-Africanism we're talking about. Once again, actually, some of the stuff that we debunked is some of the myths that he regurgitates actually out in the public. So it's once again, the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. I guess one of the myths that I know you mentioned earlier that maybe we could dig into too is the whole notion that Africa has no friends as well, which is also a lie. There's been intertrade, there's been exchange, cultural exchange and things of that nature, or aid, especially because like when you think about it too, when Africa was in a position of trying to eradicate colonialism and, you know, gaining independence, you think of place somewhere like Guinea, right, where the French, you know, removed all of their technical and intellectual, I guess, powers that they had in Guinea that were from France. They actually, you know, removed they took everything to the light bulbs. They took like doorknobs. They took everything, right? So in that case, it's like, all right, you know, you did have Africans that converged from other African states, but you did also have Africans going outside of Africa to socialist countries to go study, I mean, to go get that technical know-how and stuff like that, to come back to, you know, so and Guinea wasn't the only place this happened, right? There's other places where Africans went overseas to socialist countries to get aid. Right. The government, you know, allowed and welcomed those people to come and get that type of aid, because the West surely wasn't probably trying to do it, not in that number of people to come there to help, you know, build Africa and help unite it. So yeah, and then also when you think about economic aid, you know, you had the Soviet Union, you had China, who gave loans that were not predatory, not debt traps,
interest written, none of that,
low interest rates. Some, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the interest rate I believe that Guinea had got at the time, I think in maybe like between 58 and 60, they had got the loan. I could be wrong on the date, but it was like not too far off from when they gained independence in 58. I believe the loan was like either between like 0 to like 2%, right? Right. I don't know if you can name an IMF loan in the last in the last like 60 years. It's been like that, you know. So yeah, so that's another thing too. It's like, yeah, this, and then think about it too. A lot of the revolutionaries that you revere, like Nkrumah and stuff like that, they read and applied certain concepts and ideas from revolutionaries outside of Africa. When you read Nkrumah, the Conakry years, his letters, or Conakry letters, I believe it's called. When you read that book, you get to see how much he was reading about like guerrilla warfare and revolution and stuff like that. And he was reading a lot of like, you know, revolutionaries outside of the continent. So this whole idea that, oh yeah, we have no friends, you shouldn't be reading, you just solely read. Yes, we can center Africa in our analysis, but we can read and learn from other people who do it. That once again, dialectics is related. The imperialist powers, there's certain material bases that are the same across the board when it comes to our material conditions, due to imperialism, right? There's some nuances that are different too, but ideally the basis and the structure is the same. We're oppressed.
We're oppressed. And there's an oppressor. Exactly. Organize or perish. You know.
Exactly. So we, you know, there's the Bandung, I know I've mentioned this a million times, the Bandung conference, you know, the Afro-Asian Alliance, essentially the conference where Africans and people of Asian descent have met and talked about the non-alignment movement and things of that nature and given mutual aid to each other. So once again, we've had help, yes. And not to say that, you know, there hasn't been a history of, there's reactionaries in everywhere. There's reactionaries in every group of people. That's just a phenomenon around the world. You know, you can't just say, oh, this group of people is subject to be more reactionary than this group, and whatever the case is. It's the same thing amongst all people. You know what I mean? It's like every group of people has traitors and reactions among them. So yes, you do have some people in isolated incidents who, you know, do stuff or regurgitate some, like, you know, because white supremacy doesn't just happen. It's a global phenomenon. It's a people inherent, like there's African people yourself. That's what I hate to hear too, because, oh yeah, these group of people hate us. This group of people, Africans have self-hatred too, because of the system of global white supremacy. Yeah. Like this is a global system. So we and it's permeated through various aspects, through our social media, through our TV, through movies, through just mass media in general, right? You can't avoid it. We can't escape it. And it's everywhere, all over. Unless your country is like socialist or something like that, and, you know, is you could ban that stuff, whatever, or, you know, not have that, you know, permeate in your culture and your society. If you live in a capitalist society, that's what we see. Everywhere. That's everywhere. So the whole notion that, oh yeah, this group of people hates us and they there's Africans. You go to African continent, you go anywhere. There's groups of African people. There's reactions. Once again, there's reactions everywhere. There's people who inherit this stuff, like who internalize this stuff. You know, all over. So yeah, man. I hate when people just say that because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So yeah, there's a real material basis for us having friends, essentially.
Right. There is a material basis. We have friends. We have others in solidarity with our objective. And that's why we say here, join an organization. And if you don't know an organization that you want to join, you know, create one and do that work because we need to be unified. And I think, I mean, we, of course, talked about some of the myths. If you would love to share some of the myths you're familiar with, please leave a comment. Jeffrey, Sadiq, do you have anything else?
Nah. We appreciate you once again. Just to reiterate, we appreciate you guys listening and joining. We look forward to doing more episodes. Especially, I know we talked about internally if possibly getting on Spotify too. You know, I know some people can't always just watch the video, so hopefully look out for us at some point. I don't want to make any promises when it's going to come, but hopefully
pretty soon we're going to work on
at some point. We'll be on that. So.
And also be sure to check out the other podcasts that are going on, from the Forward Ever podcast. That's on Spotify. But we're not on there yet. You can listen to also our ancestors' voices. And there's another one I remember.
The first thing you said was Forward Ever, right?
Yeah.
I'm bad with this. I usually like.
We always at this point. It's like we're gonna put all the links in the description. Though.
Yeah, all the links will be in the description. That's all I was saying. But yeah, we have other podcasts doing parties. Sorry for our comrades if we didn't say the name.
Yeah, we didn't say that. We have so much. New Mexico chapter. That's the one I was thinking.
Yeah, New Mexico chapter. Yes. They do theirs every Thursday, I believe. I think at 12. I think 12 Eastern time. I think. Or Mountain time. I don't know, but. I'm sorry on the side. Let's go chapter. I can't remember the time, but yeah, definitely just tune in. We have so many different podcasts and things because we're trying to get that political education to y'all out there as you know any way we can. So we appreciate y'all. Hopefully y'all tune in to our comrades and what they're doing. You know, we're doing great work in the party, so we hope to have you guys join. And we appreciate you joining again. And forward ever.
Forward.